April 21st, 2025. A date that would soon be etched into the memories of soldiers and civilians alike as the world watched Eastern Europe teeter on the edge of a new era. Cold gray skies hung heavy over Eastern Europe, casting a somber shadow across the Ukrainian countryside. The air was thick with tension, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Near Kharkiv, a Ukrainian armored convoy was trapped, Russian artillery and drones closing in from all sides. Time was running out. The soldiers faced annihilation, their fate hanging by a thread as explosions echoed in the distance. Their only hope, a daring plan, hinging on the skill and courage of 2 F-16 fighter jets and their pilots at Kindapol Air Base. Pilots Viking and Ghost, prepared for a mission that could change the war's course. Every movement was deliberate, every glance exchanged between them heavy with unspoken resolve. Their jets roared to life, engines screaming against the silence, as ground crew worked with silent urgency, loading missiles and checking systems one last time. The mission strike deep inside Russia near Belgorod, to shatter the enemy's sense of safety and disrupt their operations at the very heart of their logistics. The target, a logistics hub and drone control center? Protected by S-300 air defenses, the odds were grim, with layers of radar and missiles waiting for any sign of intrusion. 27 minutes to strike and return any longer, and Russian defenses would close in, sealing their fate every second. Mattered as the jets took off. A tense silence gripped the command bunker. Officers watched radar screens, barely daring to breathe, knowing the stakes could not be higher. Viking and Ghost dropped low, hugging the terrain, threading through a maze of threats, radar missiles and enemy fighters. Every maneuver was a dance with death. Every sensor, every radio crackle could mean discovery. The pilots' nerves were steel, their focus absolute. They were ghosts, flying into history, vanishing into the clouds as the world held its breath. The world was about to see what Ukraine's new F-16s could do. Newsrooms buzzed and millions watched, waiting for the first sign of what would unfold. The fate of the convoy and the northern front rested on their skill, their courage, and a little luck. Every Ukrainian soldier looked skyward, hope and fear mingling in their eyes. This was more than a mission. It was a gamble for Ukraine's future, a test of resolve and unity in the face of overwhelming odds. The mission clock was ticking, each second echoing the urgency of the moment. The pilots flew into the storm, determined to deliver a message to Russia. A message written in fire and steel. The turning point of modern warfare was about to unfold, and the world would never be the same. On the ground, the Ukrainian convoy was being targeted by Russian artillery, and kamikaze drones. The soldiers inside the armored vehicles could feel the shock waves from nearby explosions, each blast a reminder of how close they were to disaster. The air was thick with tension, as every second brought new danger from above and ahead. The drone control stations hidden near Belgorod were ready to unleash destruction. Russian operators monitored their screens, fingers poised over controls waiting for the order to strike. These stations were the nerve centers of the assault, directing waves of drones toward Ukrainian positions. Ukraine's only chance: strike both of the drone controls and the source of the artillery. The pilots gathered for a final briefing, reviewing maps and attack plans, knowing that the fate of their comrades depended on their precision and speed and a massive ammunition depot in one coordinated attack. Intelligence pinpointed the targets, revealing their exact locations through satellite imagery and intercepted communications. They were deep inside Russia and heavily defended anti-aircraft batteries. Radar stations and patrols formed a nearly impenetrable shield around the objectives. The 27-minute window was calculated to beat the drone launch, a razor-thin margin that left no room for error. Every detail was timed to the second, and avoid alerting Russian air defenses. The pilots would have to fly under the radar, skimming treetops and valleys to stay invisible. The pilots had to fly low, strike fast, and coordinate their attack with split-second accuracy. There would be no second chances, and escape before the Russian response. The return flight would be just as dangerous, with enemy fighters and missiles ready to intercept. Seconds mattered. Any mistake meant failure and death. The pilots' nerves were stretched to the breaking point. As the clock ticked down, this mission was a major escalation. Breaking months of political debate about striking inside Russia, the world's eyes were on Ukraine, waiting to see if they would cross the line. The military reality forced a change. Ukraine had to cripple the enemy's ability to wage war from its own territory. The stakes had never been higher. The Belgorod strike was more than tactical. It was a strategic statement. It sent a message that Ukraine would not be intimidated, and that it could reach deep into enemy territory. Ukraine signaled that no part of Russia's war machine was safe. The shockwaves from the attack would ripple far beyond the battlefield. The F-16 weren't just saving a convoy, they were rewriting the rules. Their mission would change the course of the conflict. The mission was a gamble, a high-stakes risk that could alter the balance of power. But the alternative was certain defeat. If the mission failed, the consequences would be catastrophic for the Ukrainian front lines. Timing, precision, and nerve would decide everything. Every pilot knew the risks, but also the necessity. The world watched as Ukraine took the fight across the border. News outlets flashed urgent updates, and families waited anxiously for word. The pilots knew this was their moment. Every heartbeat echoed with the weight of history. The fate of hundreds depended on their success. The countdown had begun, and there was no turning back. The F-16 Block 50 Plus was Ukraine's game changer. Modern, Western supplied and packed with advanced tech. It gave Ukrainian pilots a new edge. Each jet carried 3 1,000-pound JDAM ER smart bombs. GPS-guided long-range and deadly. To clear a path, each F-16 also carried an AGM-88 HARM missile, designed to hunt and suppress enemy radar. The plan used the HARM to blind Russian air defenses, then strike with JDAMs from a safe distance. This combination turned the F-16s into both hunters and bombers. Viking and Ghost were armed for a surgical strike, precision, speed, and surprise. The mission showcased a new doctrine: swift targeted attacks with maximum impact and minimal risk. Ukraine's Air Force was evolving, and these pilots were leading the way. The F-16s were more than machines. They were symbols of a new era. The stage was set for a strike that could change the war. Flying into S-300 missile territory meant danger at every turn. Viking and Ghost flew at just 30 meters above ground, hidden from radar skimming hills and forests. One mistake could be fatal. Speed, terrain, and nerves all pushed to the limit. The critical moment, the pop-up toss. At the attack point, each pilot pulled into a steep climb, exposing themselves for just 3 seconds. That brief window was enough to release their bombs, then dive back to safety. The maneuver was a calculated risk. Too slow, and they'd be shot down too fast, and the bombs would miss. The pop-up toss demanded perfection. Russian radar would see them for only a heartbeat. The hope by the time missiles locked on the F-16s would be gone. It was a high-stakes dance with death. The pilot's skill and timing would decide the outcome. The ultimate test was about to begin. The attack began under the cover of darkness, as tension hung thick in the air. Every detail had been meticulously planned. Every risk weighed the pilot's call signs. Viking and Ghost knew the stakes were higher than ever before. From 150 kilometers out, a HARM missile streaked through the night sky. Its target locked the Russian radar operators, sensing the threat. Were forced to shut down their systems to avoid destruction. The shield around Belgorod dropped. Viking and Ghost now had their corridor, a narrow window of opportunity to strike deep into enemy territory. Viking went first, climbing high and releasing 3 JDMs. Aimed precisely at the massive ammunition depot below, trusting the technology in his training. Ghost followed close behind, targeting the heavily fortified drone control station that had coordinated so many attacks. The bombs glided for 30 kilometers, guided unerringly by GPS slicing through the night, and striking their targets with devastating accuracy. The depot erupted in a massive fireball. Thousands of tons of ammunition destroyed in seconds, the explosion lighting up the horizon. The shockwave shattered windows for miles around. The sky filled with thick, black smoke visible even from distant villages. Simultaneously, the drone control bunkers were obliterated, their command centers reduced to burning rubble. The second wave of Russian drones never launched. Their airfields were silent, their operators powerless to respond. On the front lines, Ukrainian soldiers watched in disbelief as the relentless artillery fire stopped. The drone threat vanished almost instantly. In the command bunker, commanders watched the satellite feed in stunned silence, realizing the scale of the victory unfolding before them. The gamble had paid off. Months of planning and courage had delivered a decisive blow. The strike was a complete success. The vital convoy was saved, able to move forward without fear of attack. Ukraine had delivered a message Russia couldn't ignore. A demonstration of resolve, skill, and the will to fight for every inch of their homeland. The aftermath revealed the true scale of destruction. The ammunition depot gone. Over 1,000 Grad rockets and hundreds of mortar shells incinerated. 8 fuel tankers vital for Russian armor destroyed. Military vehicles, including BMPs and howitzers, reduced to twisted metal. The financial loss nearly 30 million in equipment and supplies. But the real blow was logistical. Weeks if not months to replace. Russian supply lines were crippled. The loss of the drone control stations erased a key technological advantage. Trained operators and sophisticated equipment were lost in seconds. Russia's investment in drones was now a vulnerability. The price of the strike was measured in steel. Fuel and lives, Russia could ill afford another hit like this. The Belgorod strike was asymmetric warfare at its finest. Ukraine used technology and tactics to inflict massive damage. With minimal resources, the mission cost $2 million munitions. Fuel and operations are the result. Nearly 30 million in Russian losses. A 1-to-15 cost ratio. Precision-guided weapons made a small team devastatingly effective. The strike halted Russian operations, saved Ukrainian lives, and bought time to regroup. The F-16s proved Ukraine could threaten valuable Russian assets deep inside enemy territory. The mission was a powerful deterrent. The economics of war had changed. Ukraine had shown how to fight smarter and win. The strike paralyzed Russian logistics in the Belgorod sector. Artillery fell silent, armored units rationed fuel, and the offensive stalled. The psychological impact was profound. Nowhere felt safe. Russian troops faced a new, invisible threat. F-16s that could strike without warning. Morale plummeted. Radio silence became the norm to avoid detection. Drone operators and artillery crews knew they were targets. The mere presence of Ukrainian F-16s changed Russian behavior. Every attack now risked swift, devastating retaliation. The F-16s became a ghost, haunting the Russian military. Ukraine had gained a crucial psychological edge. The Belgorod strike marked a turning point in the war. Ukraine proved it could project power deep into Russia, forcing Moscow to adapt. Russian logistics had to move further from the border, stretching supply lines and slowing offensives. For Ukraine, the mission was a morale boost and a symbol of growing strength. The F-16s were now a proven war-winning tool. Ukrainian commanders gained new strategic options. Air power could now cripple enemy logistics before ground assaults. The battlefield had changed. Intelligence, precision, and technology now shaped the fight. Large armies were vulnerable to small, skilled teams with advanced weapons. The war was no longer just attrition. It was a contest of innovation and nerve. After April 21st, the sky over the border belonged to no one. The rules of war had changed forever.